Okay, good evening. I'm outside. Don't ask me why. We'll talk about that later on. Actually, we won't talk about that at all. But one thing I wanted to let you know, two things actually, that we're going to get to a lot of Olympics tonight, but two things I wanted to mention. Number one, the ACC network doing a piece on Katie, doing a thing with Katie Ledecky saying, "Congratulations to ACC swimmer Katie Ledecky. Stanford is now part of the ACC." Yes,
Oh, I'm
but
sorry. They don't get to lay claim to
they
her.
do not get to lay claim
They
to
do
her.
not get to
Not
lay
in
claim
any
to
way,
her.
shape, or form.
No.
So that's number one. Number two, and this is the more important thing. We talk about all of these great gymnasts, but there is a gymnast who is part of the, her name is Georgia Villa, who is part of the Olympic silver medalist team from Italy. And
know where you're going
Anthony,
with this.
she's sponsored by something you would really enjoy.
I've
Hold
seen
on
this.
a second.
Yeah.
Yes, I feel like you have, ladies and gentlemen. Sponsored by Parmesan cheese. Who shouldn't be sponsored by Parmesan cheese? I think I've now made it a goal in life that I have to be sponsored at least by Parmesan cheese. Not a brand of Parmesan cheese, just all Parmesan cheese because she's Italian. So
She looks better with Parmesan cheese than you ever will, partner. No,
I agree. I just want the sponsorship. I'm Steven Rabinowitz at Parmesan cheese. If you're listening, I'm right.
And I'm Jay Kaplan. And Rabbi, I have to agree with your T-shirt. You being in a Parmesan ad like that, that's a horrible idea.
The other part says what time, by the way, so missed that part of the idea.
I'm Anthony Strait. If you're watching this live on Facebook on our YouTube channel, no, Rabbi does not see dead people. Okay, we talked about this before the show.
I do see dead people.
There's a long.
I do.
There's a long explanation for that.
That's the second podcast in a row that I've had to mention if I see dead people in 24 hours. Welcome to the On the Sports Lines Training Camp edition. Tonight, take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the whatever. Tonight, it's a training camp sandwich as our friend Joe Tufaro joins us to get into all the NFL meat. We have Giants pastrami, Jets cheddar cheese, straight from Wisconsin. Training camps to watch out for as we have fresh meat, and we ham it up talking about the mega deals given to quarterbacks this offseason. And the bread at the bottom will be the Olympics. The bread on top will be the MLB Trade Deadline, which starts now. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the... Hold on, I got to take this call. All right. Yes, the trade deadline came and went at 6 p.m. Eastern this past Tuesday. The Yankees, currently with one of the best records in baseball at 65-45, and half a game out in the division, at least as of this writing, currently winners of 5 straight, and the Mets, who are currently half a game out of the final wild card spot at 57-51, they're playing some of the most solid baseball in baseball. Both made moves this week. Both needed to be buyers, and I want you two to talk about them. So, Jay, let's start with the Yankees, who did more to just acquire the first ever Yankee to hit 4 home runs in 3 games. His first 3 games, Jazz Chisholm.
Yeah, the Yankees were, and this has been a rarity since as long as we've been talking. You know, we've made the trade deadline, a consistent segment this time of year on our show. It's rare that the Yankees have been they have previously haven't been as busy as they were this week. Jazz Chisholm trade with the Marlins, gave up 3 minor leaguers. Mark Leiter trade with the Cubs, gave up 2 minor leaguers, neither of whom is in their top 10. Enyel De Los Santos trade with the Padres for a Rule 5 minor leaguer. He hasn't arrived yet, and his role is TBD. Does have a big arm. Strikeouts per 9 is 10.7. Strikeout rate is 28.2. And a scout who saw him pitch this year said he'll be a middle innings threat and called him durable, and that he keeps the slider down in the zone as his primary pitch. Seems like a bit of a project, though, from what I read. But the Yankees have time to see what they have with him. He's under contract through 2026. Now, Jazz Chisholm Jr., obviously the big get here. The prospects they gave up are not considered the cream of the farm system. And he's under contract through 2026. Was ranked number 16 overall on the number 9 among available hitters on the Athletics Top 50 Trade Deadline Big Board. In 101 games across 430 plate appearances and 386 at-bats with the Marlins, slash line 249, 323, 407, 13 homers, 50 RBI, 22 steals, 46 runs scored, a 730 OPS, and a 101 OPS plus. So he's a tad better than the average major league hitter. The concern with Chisholm as a hitter, according to the book on him, is that A, he swings and misses too often in zone. 2, that he goes after pitches out of the zone way too often. The fact that he sometimes hits them prevents him from actually breaking that habit unless he continues to chase. And finally, he doesn't seem to pick up the spin of pitches all that well. Now, maybe reuniting with James Rossum, who was his hitting coach in Miami from 2020 to 22 and has the same role in the Bronx, and being able to talk hitting with the likes of Aaron Judge and Juan Soto like the rest of the team does will help improve that. Now, the question when they got him was, where would he play? He came up as a shortstop, considered a good fielder at second, played 95 games in center field, 3 at second this year for his career. 167 games at second, only those 3 this year since 2022. 46 at shortstop, none since 2021. 190 in center field all over the last 2 years. Each of those positions are locked in with established Yankees at the moment. And the position the team needed to fill was third base, which he'd never played either in the majors or the minors. Played center field his first game against Boston, but he's been the starting third baseman since his second game as a Yankee Monday night against Philly. Now, Jazz was asked on the ESPN Sunday Night Baseball postgame show after the game in Boston about playing third base, and he said he'd be fine with it if that's what it took for the Yankees to win. With Chisholm at third Monday night, Boone was asked if Jazz is going to be the regular third baseman going forward, and he said no, that DJ would still get some at-bats versus lefties. While they saw how Chisholm handled third base, he'd be learning position on the fly. He was at third base on Tuesday night, even with Judge DHing, and then again Wednesday afternoon, and that tells me he's likely going to spend the bulk of his time there. He's shown some solid glove and arm work at the hot corner. You'd never know that it was not his regular position. Now, as the rabbi kind of referenced earlier, he had his second 2-run homer game since donning the pinstripes Wednesday night, and 4 of his first 7 have left the yard. First Yankee to ever do that in his first 3 games in pinstripes. The only major leaguer to ever do that was Trevor Story with the Rockies in 2016. And while the thought was that he'd automatically be slided into the leadoff spot, and he has a career .732 OPS, batting first in 192 career starts there, since it's been just awful for most of the season for the Yankees, 27th in weighted runs created plus in that spot in the lineup this season. But Alex Verdugo has been supplying some decent production since being moved into the top spot. So Chisholm has been hitting in the 5-6 slots, and it's given the Yankees lineup some length and pop in the middle of the order, something they have been missing. Now, the obvious potential off-field concern with Chisholm was his fit in the clubhouse. Now, I spoke with someone who follows the Marlins, and he confirmed that the concern was legit, telling me that Jazz could be a great player, but when he was upset, he acted like a child prone to throwing temper tantrums. And while he was a crowd pleaser for sure, his clubhouse antics, especially at the start of the season, were detrimental to morale. My source was referencing Chisholm clashing with now former teammate Miguel Rojas this spring over Rojas's leadership style. And here's the other thing, guys. Chisholm's peers in Major League Baseball overwhelmingly voted him as the single most overrated player in the league in the Athletics 2024 Anonymous Player Poll. Red flags? We'll see. On the flip side, both Derek Jeter, who brought Chisholm to Miami while he was running baseball things down there and still has a close relationship with him, and CC Sabathia were both consulted by the Yankees before the trade was made, and both signed off. Sabathia, when asked if the Yankees should acquire Chisholm, said, quote, abso-effing-lutely. The Yankees clubhouse, with veterans like Judge, Garrett Cole, and Anthony Rizzo as leaders, has been able to absorb some distinctive personalities of late, including Marcus Stroman and Alex Verdugo this season and Josh Donaldson last season. Clubhouse is a very definitive pecking order, and Jazz is nowhere near the top of it, unlike Miami. He's not an alpha on this team, and he doesn't need to be. As long as he accepts and keeps up this, I'm just happy to be here, hope I can help the ball club attitude, he'll be fine. Being on a winning team that has a chance to play serious October baseball should also help. So far, Cool Jazz is playing really well as part of the Bronx Bombers' revamped playlist. Now, the Yankees also improved their bullpen by adding right-handed pitcher Mark Leiter Jr. from the Cubs. The narrative will be that Leiter wasn't required to replace Clay Holmes as the Yankees closer, and both Boone and Judge reiterated their faith in him in the postgame Tuesday night, both Clay blowing 8 saves overall, tops in Major League Baseball, and 5 of his last 7 prior to Wednesday. Maybe it's at least worth a thought. Just saying. Especially since Leiter does give the Yankees pen something it has been sorely missing, a pitcher who can create swings and misses at a high rate. Leiter ranks in the 98th percentile in both whip and strikeout rates in 39 games with the Cubs. So-so 4.21 ERA, but an impressive 13.1 Ks per nine against an acceptable 3.2 walks per nine. Now, overall this season with the Cubs, career best in fielding independent pitching, Rabbi's favorite pitching stat, 2.11, so practically half of his actual ERA. Opposing hitter slash line, 196, 270, 261. That's an OPS of 531. His home run rate, 1.3. His strikeout rate, 34.9. His ground ball rate, 50.6. His whip is 1.101, and that 13.1 Ks per nine. He's been really effective against lefties. He's allowing a slash line of just 200, 265, 267, 532 OPS, over 98 plate appearances and 98 bats. Now, Leiter's splitter is his wipeout pitch, and opponents just cannot hit it. With the Cubs, held opponents to a slash line of 0.053, 3 for 57, 1.115 and 0.53. That's a 167 OPS, y'all. 0 extra base hits, negative 41 weighted runs created plus, and a 63.9% K rate. Now, his higher than you'd like ERA is due to a stretch of 12 appearances between the 25th of May and the 19th of June. Had a 15.58 ERA. Case can be made he was a victim of Murphy's Law, as his ground ball rate was above 55% and his hard contact rate was below 20%. But somehow he had a 462 batting average on balls in play and an insanely low 21.5% left on base rate, led to some poor outcomes, and he wound up on the disabled list not long after that. Now, scouts who dug into that rough stretch believe the pitcher they've seen since he returned from the IL on July 9 is the real Leiter, the one who did not allow a walk, run, or hit while striking out 14 of the 23 batters he faced. That's the pitcher the Yankees are hoping for, as they're getting Leiter under contract for 2 more seasons after 2024. Now, again, Leiter was not brought in to be the closer, but he's done the job in high leverage situations. 236, 304, 250 slash line, 554 OPS, just 1 extra base hit, a double, 26 Ks against 6 walks. And per Yankees coach, pitching coach Matt Blake, they feel they can use him anywhere from the 6th to the 9th against either righties or lefties. And hey, he's a Leiter, and that DNA shouldn't be discounted. He's fearless, like both his father, Mark Sr., and his uncle Al, both of whom pitched for the Yankees during their careers. He was thrown into the game Tuesday night after arriving in Philly mid-game through a scoreless inning. Little more adventurous, 8th inning in Wednesday's game, allowed to run on 3 hits. The first run he's allowed since coming off the injured list, but he struck out 2 and get out of the inning. Hopefully that bodes well going forward. Now, at the end of the day, the media fan base will invariably go overboard, harping on the Yankees not getting Jack Flaherty from the Tigers. Initial reports said it was due to what they saw in his medicals, but GM Brian Cashman refuted that, saying it was simply a matter of not being able to meet the Tigers' asking price, though he didn't go into the specific of what Detroit asked for in return. Either way, the fact that the Dodgers grabbed Flaherty for what some Major League Baseball insiders think was maybe a below market value return will not sit well with a certain type of WFAN caller. But the other needs were filled. A bat, specifically a third, along with a swing and miss guys out of the pen. And when you add that to the return of Giancarlo Stanton to the lineup and Clark Schmidt's return to the pitching staff being on the horizon, the Yankees head into August in pretty good position, as Rabbi noted at the top. Getting 2 straight series wins against Boston and Philly, a lineup that once again seems to have length and a bullpen that has more depth, not a bad trade deadline at all. If Cole rounds into his usual Cy Young form by September, the Bronx Bombers may have a legit chance in their latest chase for 28.
All right, I'm going to move on real quickly because Jay's length made sure that we can't argue with him, which is how he likes his arguments. So, exactly. Anthony, tell us about what the Mets did at the trade deadline. A little more under the radar than what the Yankees did.
Yeah. Well, the Yankees is all about the Jazz. The Mets are more. The Mets will be more bluegrass and something you find the 800 channels on your in-demand channel when it comes. Yeah, the Sirius XM. But yeah, the biggest name that the Mets got during the trade deadline was Jesse Winkler from the Washington Nationals. You look at the Mets right field situation, still in Marte going down. No timetable for his return has it yet. It's been a platoon of right fielders between Tyron Taylor, Jeff McNeil, and DJ Stewart. What Winkler does is he gives the Mets an extra bat, particularly against right-handed hitters, which, ironically enough, the Mets have struggled against this season as a whole. His slash line 257, 374.19 is good. His OBP is in 14th in the majors, and he does a good job of getting on base. the thing is with in his short stint with the Mets, he has played outfield to start the game, but of course his natural position is the DH. With JD Martinez in that position, you can expect Winkler to play outfield, at least start the game. But as we've seen, like in a couple of games in the Twins series, including the one I went to a couple of nights ago, you can see maybe like a Tyrod Taylor come in as a defensive substitute late in games, just to kind of bring him in a little more to get some more outfield reps. But he should definitely help the Mets lineup. As far as the pitching, the Mets needed to address that. Obviously, Paul Blackburn from the Oakland A's comes over with a 4-2 record, and he gives the Mets at least a viable arm on the back end of that rotation, which is missing 2 starters. Christian Scott is out for at least a month with the elbow, and Kodai Senga went down in his return start. Trying to get out of the way, leaving the pitcher's mouth. Calf injury, he's done for the remainder of the regular season. Obviously, no timetable for his return. So at the very least, Paul Blackburn gives the Mets somewhat of a viable option on the back end of the rotation. As far as the bullpen, a situation that has been up and down, mostly down for a Mets team that has been red hot the last 6 weeks. Puliscar, Bozabon, Tyler Zuban, Ryan Stanek, and Phil Manson at least gives the Mets some options for a bullpen ERA that has been close to 4.14 through the first half of the season. For the Mets, this is more substance over style. And David Stones is kind of looking long term as far as added depth to the Mets lineup top to bottom. And right now they're only a half game out of first place. They're going on a road trip from hell. So we'll see where this team is in the next 2 weeks. Whether or not the trades actually help them, at least keep them afloat in the wild card race, or if this road trip becomes the untimely demise as the season progresses.
3 time zones in this road trip and a trip back to St. Louis for 1 game. MLB did them no favors. All right, are you ready for some football? Because it's about damn time that we get to football. So, coming in right out of the bullpen right now, we bring in just a moment, if he ever connects, Joe Tufaro, our football expert, as we'll talk all things training camp as we get closer and closer and closer to fall. The biggest fan of the new kickoff, Joe, how are you doing tonight?
Good. How's everybody doing? We're going old school this year.
Nice. As usual, this is my jersey, and I am proud to wear my jersey, which is a red shirt. And we'll wait perfectly. We'll wait until later on. All right, guys.
Okay.
We're gonna talk Giants, Jets, and other teams that may or may not exist. So let's start off with the Giants, who, let's face it, have taken some hard knocks going into training camp after last year's 6-11 disappointment. Get it? Hard knocks. All right.
Well
Joe
played.
will give us the answers, but we'll provide the questions before and the debate after. So take it away, Mr. Kaplan.
Joseph, always a pleasure to see you, my friend, especially knowing, because I know your first time, on camera with us means football's right around the corner.
That's right. Getting close.
Hey, so, we know that there's never a shortage of headlines and hot takes with the Giants. And now that training camp is convened, the one with, as Billy Joel sung, the front page bold type is quarterback Daniel Jones coming back from a subpar injury-plagued 2023 after signing his generational wealth contract. Now, GM Joe Shane had previously defended his quarterback, saying on Hard Knocks that not even Patrick Mahomes could have won with the offensive line the Giants rolled out that's last season. But this is still a make or break season for Jones, as the team can cut him loose after 2024 per the terms of his contract. What do you need to see from Jones during camp and the preseason games, if he plays, to believe that he's all the way back from the neck and ACL injuries and can return to a level of quarterback play closer to what we saw during the career year he put up in 2022 when he led the G-Men to their first playoff win since Super Bowl 46?
Yeah, Jay, good to see everybody, by the way.
Hello.
Yeah, I think it's, you got to see his health. You got to see if his mobility is still there. Few guys were picking on, asking Dable about, you saw him run a few times in camp on a few throws, and he said, yeah, we still want him to do that. We still want to see if he can run. We still want to make sure that if he can escape the pocket or he feels he needs to, that he can do it. So I'm just looking for him to be healthy throughout, continue to make strides in that place. I mean, it's a quick return from an ACL, but he seems to have been in the building since day one and done all the work, done everything they do. We know they have good trainers there, so hopefully they're keeping track of everything. They have enough guys in camp to give him a little bit of a break. I don't think you'll see him play too much. Maybe the one series in game 3 or whatever it is against Detroit. But I just want to see him daily in practice, making throws, stepping into it, feeling good again in the pocket with people around his feet, and seeing if his mobility is still there, because that's a key part to his game, is to be able to get out there and run a little bit also.
I want to follow up on that for a second. John Mara made comments today, sort of giving an endorsement to Daniel Jones, basically saying, let's see how he plays with the better offensive line. Does that give him any confidence, or is that just more lip service, do you think, going forward?
Well, they were at a community event today, so of course Mara was there for a reason, and then the media has to jump on asking him a few questions, so he's not going to say too much, and a very much of a John Mara answer of, I support this group, everybody agrees where we are. If they had done something different, he would have agreed with that. So he was just glad that everybody's on the same page. I think he believes in Daniel. I think he likes Daniel a lot. I think he does feel he was the correct pick at the time. Very Eli Manning-like as far as how he speaks, how he carries himself. The fact that, again, even through the injury, first one in the building, last one to leave, has done all the work that he needs to do. He's a giant. They love that consistency. They love that fact that he's willing to put in the work. He wants to be there. And Jay, you bring up, you're one of the few people, you three guys are one of the few people that we can talk to about his contract and be honest about it. Is it really doesn't kick in till the end of this year. So they can certainly, you can talk about him making $40 million. Talk about however you want to talk about it. He isn't. And he's not getting it unless he plays well. And so the way it was structured was good for both sides. It gives him the opportunity to show that he can stay healthy. Now, again, go back years ago. And again, some of us are a little bit older than others. What happens, Jay? What happens to rookies, Jay? They get hurt, right?
They get hurt.
What happens to first, second year, third quarterbacks? They get hurt. Phil Simms was hurt his first 4 years before he turned out to be Phil Simms. So, again, I don't want to go back ancient history, but it happens to everybody. And this is what you're going to live with. And if he can stay healthy, I'm more worried about the neck than I am about his knee, because I think that the neck wasn't so much about getting hit. That seemed to be like an injury he had before that kind of kicked in from just being out there and playing and taking the normal abuse that a football player takes, other than it being a bad offensive line. So that's the one that bothers me more, because it's obviously more debilitating, and to keep him out of games, which is something we're not used to around here, because Eli played for 16 years and never missed one half of a game total. So you just hope that, again, I'm not worried about the knee. I'm more worried about the neck, and I hope that he just comes through all that stuff. And I'm not worried about him learning the offense. I'm not learning about him learning players or getting used to different things or not having Saquon. I think it actually helps in play calling and things of that nature. Jay, we talk about this all the time. When you have somebody you feel like you have to force the ball to all the time, or that your coach says, hey, let's just hand it off 3 times because I'm not sure what's going on with our receivers or our offensive line, you kind of lose all that.
Yep.
You lose the ability to be less than one-dimensional, because you feel like you have to have him have the ball. Tiki got the ball 88% of the time in the Giants offense for 1 year. Again, did a lot with it and was very successful with it, but it really does make you kind of one-dimensional, and sometimes you're better off going the other direction.
Yeah, I got 2 follow-up points for you, Joe. One is just, a comment, and the other I kind of want to get into with you. It's funny, like I know you guys watched Hard Knocks. I didn't, I kept track of it, in what I was reading because Dan Dugan, who, Joe, I know you're not a fan of his, who's one of the beat writers for the Giants for the Athletic, references the episodes a lot. It seems to me, and, you guys can give me an answer or not. Joe Schoen doesn't come off really well in this series because he goes from defending Jones, passionately in one scene in one episode to seemingly like, ready to throw him under the bus, trying to do everything possible to trade up to get another quarterback. So, to me that I don't know how much of an elephant is going to be in the room, though. Obviously that elephant will obviously get smaller and smaller as we get closer and closer, to the season, because it's no longer going to be a thing. It's going to be about what happens on the field. Right. And to me, what I've kind of noticed is that, there's been a little inconsistency in Jones's play, during last week's 11 on 11s, which kind of continued a little bit into this week when the switch from football in shorts to football in pads. Potentially rust from not being played, not playing for 8 months after an ACL in the neck. The interesting thing to me, though, is that unlike last year, the Giants have heavily focused on 11-11 periods, OTAs, minicamp, and training camp, seemingly like trying to ramp things up to get Jones back up to where he was prior to injury. It's something that, that was written that I know, that struck a chord with me. First practice of camp last year, 15 passes in 7-on-7s, 4 passes in 11-on-11s. All 13 of his attempts in the first practice this year, 11-on-11. But Joe, as you said, he's running around. He doesn't seem to have any physical limitations, taking every rep with the first team offense. Dable said that's the plan, seems to be moving well, scrambling like he used to. There does seem to be an emphasis on getting the ball out of his hands quicker and avoiding negative plays. But that's something I'm always going to be in favor of. Had some bad days. Wednesday was considered sloppy as hell. Good days. Today was considered one of them. What's interesting to me, Joe, and I don't know if you think this is going to have any effect on him one way or another. Dable seems to be taking on a larger role in offensive play calling, and I'm just wondering if that'll go, a little further down the line to getting Jones back to his 2022 self, because that's back then Dable was calling pretty much all the plays. Do you think it's going to have an impact?
Yeah. So your 2 points. The first thing about Joe Schoen, again, I think people forget he's not a fan of the team. He's the general manager, and he has to look at every option. True. And where it's going to go. So for him to go down the street and walk over to New England and say, hey, if you're going to trade out of 3, at least call us, because he's smart enough to know you can only move 2 or 3 spots. Right. And he even said, he sits in his office one day and he goes, well, unless we're going to pull a Ricky Williams deal, like if we really want, if we want to go to number 1, we could move up and then never pick again for the next 2 years, which is not the point. And He points out, he says, even when the Jets called in the first round, which they show that Joe Douglas calls him before they pick Malik Neighbors, and he says, yeah, we're going to stay where we are, because he said, we only have 6 picks. Right. Because I don't want to give another one away this year and then another one away next year when we only have 6. So again, I think people forget that you have to have the discussion of every possibility, whether it's ridiculous or not. They show the day of the draft, Jay, and again, maybe the fact that you didn't watch it is tough because, Dugan's not telling you every story that goes on, but the day of the draft, they're sitting in his office with Dable, Mara, and Tisch, and he walks through 6 different scenarios. And again, they know they've scouted Caleb Williams, but we know he's going to go. We're probably sure he's going 1. We're pretty sure he's going 2. The first option is number 3, but I just talked to the guy from New England. He said, we're going to stay. We're going to pick. We don't really have a choice either. We have to make this choice. We don't have a backup. We don't have a starting quarterback coming back from injury. We have nobody in the building that can play. So once it got past 3, then they're like, okay, then San Diego's the trigger. So if they take Marvin Harrison, then we can take a guard. But I think we could get Alt lower, so then they would have traded out. If Neighbors and Adunze and Harrison had gone early, they were going to trade out because they weren't taking JJ McCarthy to move down to take the guard later on in the draft. So again, I think people forget that he's not a fan. It's not about trying to pick a quarterback. It's not about trying to make the big splash. he has to do what makes sense for the team. And what makes sense for the team is to have a guy sitting there that walks through every scenario and says, okay, I love Daniel. We want him to stay. We've done this this has been the plan since day one when we got here, to see how good he was, to give him, not do the 5th-year option, try to figure out an extension. And so here we are, but we can get out of it next year. So what's up there? Could we get Drake May? Could we have traded down? And, could we have traded up and gotten Drake May? They may have, but what he did say, Jay, and I think, again, Dugan probably left this part out. In that part of the discussion, he says, but I'm going to talk to Daniel in about an hour and tell him what's coming.
It is all about context, Joe. And like you said, I saw those two different pieces, and I'm like, okay, that doesn't make him look good. And I'm guessing, I have a feeling that the Giants probably wish that they hadn't kind of like opened the doors as wide open as they did from what I've read. But like you said, he doesn't have to be a fan. So it's not a question of, how the fans think he comes off. He's doing, like you said, he's doing his job.
Yeah, and ownership. And I'll tell you right now, when I watched it, I got a bigger appreciation for him and how he runs his staff and how he takes care of everybody, and the way he runs the day, and the way he sat down with everybody in the room and they talk to each other. And when John Mara walks in at once and he knocks on the door, and Joe says, "Come in," and Mara goes, "Yeah, good answer." I wasn't going to come in anyway. But you can see the relationship between the three of them, Dable and Mara and Shane, that, look, I may not have done this, but but you can give me the context in which you made this decision and it makes sense. So, I'll trust you going down this way. So,
and this is the context I was looking for from you guys, because like I said, I'm only going off what I read. I hadn't watched. I knew you had.
And Rabbi, I know, watched it in a row instead of a week to week to week. So I think
that's how I watch everything. Number one, that's how I watch everything. Number two, and I honestly think this gives me more appreciation for what a general manager does, and especially when you have a quarterback who was coming off of an injury and you have a fan base who is, needless to say, restless. You have to at least explore where you are. When you're in the position of a top 6 position, you have to at least explore it. You don't have to do it. You just have to at least show your fans that you're examining everything and not making a commitment to Jones, especially because there's still, they do not have to do anything with it. They do not have to have him in there next year. They do not have to, but they know that it's going to be an option.
Yeah, and even the discussion around backup quarterback, because Dable says, hey, I'll go with the same room we had last year. We're fine, because Tyrod Taylor played well. He knows the system, second year, but the whole thing. But they also weren't going to overpay for that. They weren't going to go get Darnold. They weren't going to go get whoever else was at $15 million. They found Drew Lock at $4 million, and he goes, perfect. The guy can play. He's still got a strong arm. He can run. He's still, he knows what he's doing. He was in a good system. We feel comfortable if this is what has to happen. And again, you have to be prepared, right? You can't just go, you can't do what the Jets, we'll circle back.
We'll get to the Jets. We'll get to the Jets.
Can't do what the Jets did last year.
Giants did a couple of years ago, where it was Mike Glennon and, people who we've never even heard of. You got to have that room. But Joe, just real quick, the Dable thing, do you think that's him taking more responsibility as a play caller is going to have more of a positive effect on Jones and get him back where they want him to be?
He wants his voice to be the one in the quarterback's ear. So whereas he was listening to Kafka and giving him suggestions of what we should call next or what are you doing next, between them, it was Kafka's voice in the helmet. Dable wants his, so he can say things like, give him the little reminders that Dable wants him to have on every play of either, hey, throw it away if you don't see it, do this, don't go this, whatever it is, that give him that positive thought process. He wants his voice to be the last one in the helmet, which I think is fantastic.
And he's starting it right now to kind of build that.
So you get used to it,
that connection.
Used to hearing me, and we get exactly.
All right, Anthony. Batter up.
Yeah. Hey, Anthony.
You're here. You're here. You're around.
Jump in. This is a great conversation. First off, you never go wrong with a Marco Valla juice. That's number one.
That's right.
Besides the point, in your opinion, which offensive player is this make or break as far as training camp is concerned. Outside of the usual suspect, which is quarterback.
Yeah. No, I think Evan Neal is obviously the person that everybody has their eyes on, right? Is he going to be healthy? Is he not going to be healthy? Is he the guy that they picked at Alabama, or is he not? Is this an issue that's going to continue to happen all year long? And because it's the position that they put the most effort into fixing. Yep. And again, Jay, if you watch those discussions, very, very straightforward, very, very honest of, hey, I can't blame Daniel for anything because nobody could have done anything back there. Patrick Mahomes could do. And he even said, hey, you put him up in Detroit, he would have been fine. And it was even the Saquon discussion saying, hey, if he's playing in Detroit, he's fine because they have an offensive line. Like, they admit on camera they had no offensive linemen at the end of last year. Like, they had nobody left to play. Too many guys were hurt, too many guys were not good, and they had to revamp it, which they did. They spent a lot of money on it, and hopefully they fixed it. They brought in a fantastic coach, by the way. They signed a new guy from Oakland yesterday or 2 days ago.
Runyon's a great pickup.
Runyon's a great pickup. The guy the other day, Illuminor's been a great pickup, who can move out to right tackle right away. But to answer your question, Anthony, I think the obvious pick for the offensive guy that everyone's going to at least keep an eye on and see how it progresses and how it develops is going to be Evan Neal, because if he winds up not being able to play or not being able to get in enough practice time to start against Minnesota, then you're not going to want to break up that 5-man group, right? Unless it's really bad. And then you're going to have to, because you don't want to move, you actually have to move 4 different guys around. It's not just a matter of taking one guy out and putting another one in. You got to move Illuminor back to right guard, and then Runyon goes from right guard to left guard, and then so it's a little bit of a confusion there, but I think he's the obvious pick for who you got to keep an eye on for a make or break, answer.
I would agree too. I think back to a couple of occasions, like the Monday night game against Seattle, where he was just basically caught looking like a deer in headlights, inadvertently blocked one of his own players, just have a mix up. And picking up a blitz and with Evan Neal, he was basically brought in to kind of be the other side of that, to anchor that off the line with Andrew Thomas, and it had just been inconsistent, not worked out. He's been a good run blocker. It's been pass protection that has been his problem, and obviously getting into it with fans online didn't exactly help his cause.
No.
And now he's on the pub list to start training camp, and there's a good chance that he may not even get an opportunity to be a starter if this offensive line that the Giants have in place right now is able to gel. And obviously, when you look at successful teams around the league, offensive line has to be the most stable part of your offense. Otherwise, you can't do anything if you're constantly changing parts. And we saw that last season with the Giants, constantly having to shift guys around due to injury or just inconsistent play. And Evan Neal, it's a guy that is going to be under a heavy microscope the moment he steps foot on the football field, if he does come week 1 against Minnesota.
And I think it goes back to what Jay was saying, how much 11 on 11 they're playing, because they want these linemen out there. They want them working together. They want to see how they can gel. They want to see how many guys can play, how many different positions, move them around all day long. It's so funny when the media guys are like, oh, so does that mean Runyon's going to play right guard instead of left guard? And Dable's like, well, it's day 2. And, I'm not naming any starters tomorrow. But guess what? I want all 5 guys to be able to play in 5 different positions. And then I want their backups to be able to play in 5 different positions. So if they go 11 on 11 for the rest of training camp, it makes sense because you want them out there. You want them working on their craft. So,
All right. I got 2 questions for you, Joe, to finish this off.
2?
Well, number 1. What was Brian Daboll's plan to lose pretty much half a Daboll in this training camp, because he looks like a completely different person? And number 2, what do you expect as the make or break defensive player off of Shane Bowen and essentially the coaching staff of the 2022 Titans and their defense in this training camp?
So Dable and his wife both lost like 50 pounds each. They look fantastic.
It's insane.
And
He
he
looks
said,
skinnier than I do.
he said for me, it's always been this way because it's always been a roller coaster. He goes, I happen to be on the top, way too high last time, and now I'm back to where he goes. I'm sure it'll go back the other way. So at some point, he's realistic. He goes, it was a bet that he
Wait till
lost.
November.
Yeah, it was a bet that he lost to a college friend of his that he had to go on the diet this time.
Ah.
And so they did it, and it was fun. So, and of course, they both look fantastic. So, defensive, I think, to answer your question, Rabbi, is probably Trey Hawkins and whoever the other cornerback is, whether it's, I was going to go with Dane Belton because he's going to take over for X-Man. And
Yeah.
so that's a good spot too. So there's a couple of spots on defense that have to be cleared up, but I think they found a slot defender. The kid from Kentucky that they drafted is absolutely amazing.
Andrew Phillips.
You're going to move Isaiah Simmons back to being a nickel kind of a guy, which is perfect for him. But I think Hawkins has either got to make it or break it this time. So they picked him last year. You remember it was Trey Banks and Hawkins. They were going to be the two starters. That was Wink's idea was, oh, look at these two fantastic guys I got. Banks turned out to be the real deal. Hawkins struggled a little bit. And so he's back now and he's fighting for a spot. So I think the make or break year as far as a starter would be with him and whoever else is there to play on the outside between Cordell Flott and a couple other guys. But that whole secondary has been revamped, some of it on purpose, some of it not on purpose. But I think they got to figure that out. And then they drafted a safety in the draft who's absolutely fabulous. Also, the kid from Minnesota.
Yep.
So, we'll see how all that plays out. So I would say, the tough thing about Jay playing 11-11 and having guys like Malik Neighbors and this, like, you don't know it again, is he that good or is your defense that bad? And, hopefully, and it's because what they've said is the balls that have been intercepted and stuff, of course, they're saying, oh, they're underthrown, they're this, they're that. Well, it's hard to figure that out unless you're standing there as to which side of the ball has the advantage and which side doesn't. And, biorhythms of the day and, things start going the wrong way, it's going to keep going that way. And, that's just how practice goes. But I think they're smart enough. And I know Dable's smart enough to know how to read a practice and know what's honest and what's just kind of eye candy.
No, you talk about Flott, Joe, and he has said, and Neighbors has echoed it. The two former LSU teammates, they have really enjoyed going against each other in a lot of those 11-on-11 periods. There,
now him and
hopefully
Banks
to bring out the best in both of them.
Yeah, and even Brian Burns versus Thomas and
Tommy.
and
Oh yeah, he's loved that being able to
like,
go against an All-Pro.
I hold my breath every day, going, just don't get hurt, guys, going against each other. But they are just going to make each other. I mean, Brian Burns should be able to line up on Sunday and go, this is all you got. You should see our guy. Like, our guy is 10 times as good as this, right?
It seems like a double-edged
tougher for me.
Exactly.
It seems like a double-edged sword because you want your guys to play as hard as they possibly can in practice, but you don't want them to get hurt. So it's almost like you have to find that right balance, which is why the number of training camp sessions have gone to like 5, pretty much in all of the negotiations. All right. We got to move on to gangrene. It's the New York Jets, who also had a disappointing year a year ago, going 7-10. Look to take quarterback Aaron Rodgers, who says he does not like distractions and always ends up being a distraction, in his second training camp and make it into a healthy season and take the team to new heights. Copyright Kelsey Brothers. Don't sue me, guys. Anyway, Jay, let's talk with Joe about what to expect at Florham Park.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, we know that both the mainstream national media and the non-mainstream social media will be making a big deal of all the off-field noise that Aaron Rodgers creates, trips to Egypt, continuing to do guest spots on a certain YouTube show and podcast other than this one. But there's on-field noise to sift through for a 40-year-old guy.
We have quarterbacks on our show? Holy shit, I didn't even realize this. What are you booking these days?
But there's always plenty of on-field noise to sift through for a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles injury, since the Jets' 2024 season will only go as far as Rodgers' health and on-field performance takes them. And since we focus on what happens between the hash marks here at On the Sports Lines, what are you looking to see from Rodgers during camp? And it'll probably just be camp, and the 3 upcoming joint scrimmages with the Commanders, Giants, and Panthers. as head coach Robert Saleh said, it was unlikely that Rodgers would play in any of the preseason games. What do you need to see that will say to you, he's the quarterback Gang Green is hoping for?
Well, I don't think there's anything you can look for in practice. You know, the fact that he's already getting into it with some of the players and some of the guys that he's not God anymore like he was in Green Bay. And even though he brought all his little playmates with him last year, some of those guys are gone. So he's not I don't see him getting that same level. We said this last year. I know I said it. I just don't see him getting that same level of respect from every guy that's wearing that color. Like, I just have to throw my helmet on the field because he's going to make me so much better, and I don't have to do all this stuff and just wait till he's in there. You can't go through these many practices with backup quarterbacks with him standing on the sideline, just being annoying. I mean, you can just tell he's telling people what they're doing wrong with. Like, get the hell out there and do something. I don't want you standing here watching me and telling me you ran that route wrong. How do you know what I did? Like, you're not out there in the quarterback, you're standing on the sideline. So I don't know how you build any sort of camaraderie. I don't know how you build any sort of team. The guy's not going to he's going to barely practice. He's not going to be in these joint things. If they are, it's going to be 7-on-7. I don't think at his age, coming off of what he came on, the fact that he stopped running, and Jay, you and I talk about this all the time. He stopped 3 years ago. He stopped running 3 or 4. It's 4 years now. He stopped running. So again, if you haven't fixed the offensive line, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in the next 2 questions, can he stand up for 18 games? And I'm willing to take an over under for the number of games he actually plays, because I don't think he's going to last that long. And I don't think he's going to be, again, look at every quarterback at any age that's come back after a period of time, and look how rusty they are and how off their timing is, how their footwork suffers. There's something that's going to suffer because he's not doing it every day.
Right.
The fact that he was so good is because he practiced every day. He practiced his footwork, his arm angles, all that stuff. Your muscle memory goes away after of just sitting around doing nothing. And the fact that he's not sitting around doing nothing, but he's traveling and going on doing all these other things, is not a positive to me. So
no.
I just think you see guys like, name some quarterbacks come back. You know, I mean, the Flacco's like the only one who actually played well when he came back. I mean, Cam Newton played one great game when he went to New England and then was awful the rest of the year. You just don't just walk out there like, hey, look at me, I'm Aaron Rodgers. Well, nobody cares. And certainly nobody on the other side cares. And, you know, if they can't protect them, they better start figuring out who the backup is, because they didn't last year. They made a huge mistake last year of not going out and getting a Flacco the next day, who had already played and knowed the system and played great for Cleveland the rest of the year after their
player of the year.
You know,
yeah,
happens all the time. So
yeah, I mean, Joe, I mean, I you know, from what I've seen and what I've read, there does seem to be an overall definitive disconnect with the first team offense since the pads, at least since the pads were put on for 11-on-11 periods earlier this week. I mean, you talk about the basics. Joe Tippmann and Aaron Rodgers can't seem to get a snap, you know, exchanged properly. I mean, you're talking about Tippmann seems to have the yips on what amounts to, you know, the most basic and some would say the most important part of his job. As you said, Rodgers and Garrett Wilson seem out of sync. His buddy Lazard and other receivers are dropping passes. It's funny. I read somebody charted Tuesday's practice, and Rodgers was unofficially 10 for 20 in 11-on-11 periods, 2 for 4 and 7-on-7. Even, you know, noted offensive mind, Nathaniel Hackett has called the offense inconsistent, you know, and you know, people are like, oh my God, it's a stark departure from the previous week where Rodgers and the first team offense are firing all cylinders. Well, you know, as my head coach is fond of saying, there's a stark difference between, you know, the real football when it's football in shorts. What was interesting to me, and I'd love to get your take on this, Joe, a quote by, you know, Tyler Conklin, who's likely to be the starting tight end. He said this on Monday, quote, so much of it is just trying to see the game through Aaron's eyes, right? And that's kind of impossible because he's kind of like the Oppenheimer of football. I mean, it's a great quote, but it doesn't bode well for this team if something like this is continuing into the season.
No, again, I don't think he's the easiest guy. If you haven't played with him for a long period of time, I don't think he's the easiest guy to figure out. I don't think he's a good communicator. I mean, Jordan Love said he never talked to him.
Yeah.
You know, never said a word to him. So I don't think he feels like he needs to, you know, get down to that level. Like, oh, I have to talk to these rookies, or I have to talk to these. Like, it's do it my way, because this is how it was in Green Bay. It's just like Peyton Manning was. Do it my way, and if you don't do it my way, we're going to do it again. And that's what he was used to, running his own practices, doing his whole thing, calling his own snap counts. And that's not what they're doing there. But he still expects the same results from those guys.
Right.
You and I said it, Jay, when he left Green Bay. I thought it was a huge mistake to want to get out of Green Bay, because he ran the place. You own that town.
Yep.
Retire if you want to get out. Don't try to prove you can do it somewhere else. Like, oh, I'll take my 2 receivers and we'll go show you who's a championship team, and you go, yeah, how'd that work out? You know,
Not so good so far.
no, because you need guys. So.
Do you think that Aaron Rodgers in year 2, thinking that he kind of almost has a change in attitude despite virtually playing nothing last year, shows that everything he did in year 1 during training camps were just an act than anything else?
Yeah. Yeah, I have no confidence in him at all. I don't think that I feel this is the first time in my life I would say I feel bad for the Jets as a team, because when he leaves and everybody else he brought along with him leaves, and you don't have any money left to pay anybody because you paid all these guys all this money and you brought in every 40-year-old receiver you could find, what are you going to do?
Yep.
You have nothing. You have nothing for the next 5-10 years. You don't have a quarterback. You don't have any jack. The only good thing you're going to wind up with, you're going to pick in the top 10 again. It's 4 years in a row you've picked in the top 10. Sam Darnold was supposed to be your darling, and you picked him at 3, and guess where you picked the next year? 2. And then where should you pick the next year? 6. So you're never getting any better. You keep bringing in one guy to make a difference on a team game that takes 11 guys on offense and 11 guys on defense, and you think you bring in one guy, it's going to make all the difference in the world, and it doesn't happen.
Hey,
Anthony,
if it doesn't work out, Jets ownership is going to be bringing in a whole lot more than just one guy.
Oh yeah,
Anthony, fire away with your question.
Well, we want to stay on the team game for mentality. And Joe, same question as with the Giants. On the offensive side of football, who is it going into training camp? Just make a break time for them?
You know, I would have to pick one of the offensive linemen. And I don't know them all by name, but I would say either the 40-year-old guy they picked up from Dallas, or the 40-year-old guy they put in right side. You know, any of those guys go down. Again, there's no, I did do a little research, which you know is very much unlike me. But Jay, I looked through the depth chart for the Jets.
Okay.
There's not a name that I recognize after the starters. There's nobody. Yeah. Nothing. So you're going to wind up again in the same spot that you were. And you know guys are going to get hurt. And you know guys in the offensive line are going to get hurt or have to sit out for whatever reason. It's going to happen.
Vera Tucker's the Giancarlo Stanton of the Jets. You know he's going to get hurt.
Exactly. You just know it is. And again, you bring in a guy who was great for a while, fantastic. But I just don't think that I would say the entire offensive line, Anthony, is what's the key to this game, because if you can't keep him standing upright and he's not going to run anymore, you might as well play a different quarterback, because he's not going to be effective. I don't care who else you have out there. If you can't protect them, because guys are smart on the other side. You know, they're going up again. You look at the AFC and you think about some of those defensive coordinators. You think Steve Spagnuolo hasn't already figured out what he's, you know, by the time they would have to play him, who he's going to be able to beat, how he's going to be able to put pressure on them, how he's going to be able to force him to do things that he doesn't want to do. Again, you only have to force him one way, because he's not going to run. So I think I would say, in answer to your question, the entire offensive line, but whoever's supposedly playing right tackle would be the biggest one for me. And
I have to agree with you on this one, Joe, because I got the Jets depth chart on the screen. Outside of starters, it gets really thin once you get to that second unit. Vera Tucker basically his last 2 seasons ended with season-ending injury, so there's a durability issue with him. Tyron Smith, you don't know if there's question marks with his health. He's been lack of durability, to say the least.
Yeah.
And then you look at just the interior of the offensive line: Simpson, Tipman, and Morgan Moses, this is questionable on the depth chart. If one of those guys go down, the Jets are going to be really in a lot of trouble because that second unit I don't recognize anybody that can step in and actually help this offensive line keep it together. And you got a quarterback who's 40 years old, coming off an Achilles injury, who's stationary. I'm thinking to myself, if I'm a Jets, you got Breece Hall in the backfield. Why not just run the ball more to at least help and give yourself a little bit of a chance? I think back to the game against Dallas last year, where for whatever reason they had Zach Wilson throw the ball again, and you had an offense that was actually running the ball very well against a defense that couldn't stop the run at all season. It just tells you the kind of problems that the Jets had, not just in personnel, but just in play calling in general. I mean, that's just pretty much, yeah.
I think we all agreed by the end of the year, they had very poor coaching last year. It was almost like, even though it was only the second play of the season that Aaron Rodgers went down, or third play of the season, it was almost like they gave up. Like they're like, oh, the year's over, right? They didn't do anything. They didn't go get a quarterback. They didn't change the way they play. They let Zach Wilson throw it all over the field. And you're like, what are you guys doing? Like, you have 17 more games or 16 more games to go. Basically you had 17 more games to play. He only played the first year. So, you really had your whole season in front of you, and it was almost like the coaching staff just gave up. And so I think that was a big part of it last year too.
So they say defense wins championships, Joe, but unfortunately the Jets were third in total defense and the Panthers were number 4. So that's complete bullshit sometimes. However, the Jets still have a pretty good defense, but I have a feeling they have a few guys in the spotlight that you want to kind of
show. Yeah, I'm not big on names for the Jets. I think, again, the other side of Sauce Gardner has to be figured out. Again, they seem to rely on one guy at each position. And I know Jay and Anthony did what I just said. You look at the depth chart, there's no names behind anybody. So if Mosley goes down, or if these other guys, a couple of these other guys go down, you got nothing. I guess the biggest question mark for training camp, and Rabbi reminds me of it every other day, is Hassan Reddick, right? I mean, is the guy going to play? Are you going to sign him? Or is he taking up a spot? Is he not taking up a spot? Is he going to start? He's not going to practice, because you can't figure out if he even wants to play, or if he wants to, how much money he's going to want. Is he going to sit out for the whole year? So that's going to be the conversation on the defensive side for a while, because what are you going to do? So if he signs, he's just going to walk in and take somebody else's spot that's practiced for 4 weeks. And again, it's just a dysfunctional group. The GM's not very good. The head coach is awful. He got, they got suckered into hiring him because he had a good defense in San Francisco. You know what he had in San Francisco? He had good defensive players in San Francisco. And they always had good defensive players in San Francisco going back for years. So it wasn't like he invented the defense that they played. He just walked in and coached it, and then tried to bring it here, and it didn't work. And so he changed it. So he's not even running the system he came over with. And again, I don't like guys who are head coaches and coordinators at the same time, who fake it and give it to some other guy to call the plays. But he's really the defensive guy, and just never really works out. So I would say that my answer would be Reddick. So.
By the way, D'Amico Ryans did a pretty damn good job doing it last year.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's not a 49ers problem. It's kind of a solid problem.
Yeah.
That concludes our Jets bashing for the evening. Let's get this show back on the road. All right, guys, let's take a trip into the fake training camp bus and go around the NFL. Whether it be new rookie QBs looking to start from day one, position battles, or let's face it, the media circus for people just making something out of absolutely nothing. That would be the Cowboys, by the way, anybody who's watching. There are many camps to watch out for. Jay and Anthony, you go first. You're going to look at the AFC. Pick me an AFC camp that you're looking at, Jay. And I'm just going to go get a water because this might be.
I figured you'd let Anthony lead off. And why don't you go ahead? Once I get going, y'all can also.
It doesn't matter. No, you know what, Jay? Go first. Go first here,
sure?
Because yes, I'm sure.
Let's guess. Let's talk about the Steelers.
I mean, it's there, so why not?
I didn't get a choice to pick the Giants. He gets a chance to pick the Steelers.
Well,
Well,
we kind of talked the
look,
Giants beforehand.
it's
Local goes first.
it's rare that they actually have so much instability in an offseason that they're actually worth talking about. I mean, you got three different things that are going on here. You got a completely new quarterback room. You got an open slot opposite Pickens as the number 2 receiver, and you got a brand new offense. I mean, the quarterback room, I mean, once last season ended after the loss to the Bills in the wild card round, Mitch Trubisky was shown the door. When former Bronco Russell Wilson was brought in, Kenny Pickett had a hissy fit and asked to be shown the door. And then Mason Rudolph, seeing the writing on the wall heading into free agency, decided to not come back through the door. Steelers then took a flyer on Justin Fields from the Bears, brought in veteran journeyman Kyle Allen, hired a brand new quarterback coach in Tom Arthur, and just like that, you got a completely new quarterback room. Wilson, to use Mike Tomlin's words, has been in the pole position pretty much since day one. It translates into, yes, he's quarterback 1, but since we don't make those decisions official until training camp ends, we're not calling him that right now. It's very Tomlin. But Tomlin's also been a little cautious with the veteran quarterback, held him out of his full slate of reps across all periods this week. The first practice is in pads. He's recovering from a little calf injury sustained. He's pushing a sled in the team's conditioning tests previous week. Why a quarterback is pushing a sled is beyond me. I mean, he's eventually going to get his full workload back, but I doubt you'll see Wilson in any situation where he's got to evade a pass rush or worry about linemen landing on him until he's 100%. I mean, we're more than a week away from the preseason opener against Houston. Not that I expect him to play too much, and you're 5 weeks away from the regular season opener. Granted, this lessening of activity has allowed Justin Fields to run a lot more with the first team. There's no quarterback competition, though. I mean, he's still got the same issues he had in Chicago. The fact that, his first team reps in the Steelers, 7 shots, which is their goal line scenario over the last 2 days, 7-2 run versus pass. It's as much about new offensive coordinator Arthur Smith exploring heavy personnel packages, as it is about those issues. I mean, Fields still, he's got arm strength. He's got speed. He can make plays with his legs, but he's still inconsistent with his accuracy, still tends to, go too quickly from being a passer to a runner when his first read isn't there. Wilson's got the work ethic. His leadership has been there the moment he stepped, into the Rooney sports complex, which is something that Tomlin highly values from his quarterback. Offense has been dire need of that quality since Ben retired. Wilson still seems to have some, still plenty of arm talent. He did complete 66% of his passes. He had 26 touchdowns against only 8 picks, had a 90.8 passer rating on a really mediocre Denver offense last season. So if that translates into the regular season, it's going to be a welcome change from Pickett, who missed open receivers on an annoyingly routine basis. Look, Wilson gives the Steelers the best chance to win now, even if he's no longer dangerous or let Russ cook. He doesn't have to be that guy. Not in Arthur Smith's offense, not with a defense loaded with Pro Bowlers like, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and the newly acquired Patrick Queen. The wide receiver battle, I mean, this is what happens when you trade a guy like Deontay Johnson, most productive receiver over the last 5 years, averaged 78 catches, 870 yards, scored 25 touchdowns, made a Pro Bowl and a second-team All-Pro. You ship him off to Carolina, ostensibly to, get yourself a legitimate cornerback 2 opposite Joey Porter Jr., But to me, I think the underlying thing there, get rid of a guy who became a negative, unprofessional influence on Pickens. This guy is the future star of your team. Johnson had at least 2 heated locker room spats with teammates last season. But the question, the fallout is the hole that creates. And none of the guys that they brought in, have a resume that's even remotely close to Johnson's, and so far none of them have separated from the pack. To start opposite Pickens in week 1, Van Jefferson, plenty of first team offense reps for the first week of camp, seems to be in the pole position, started all 17 games, 50 catches on 89 targets, 802 yards, 16 per catch, 6 TDs with the Rams in 2021. Playing time and targets have dropped by almost 50% in the last 2 seasons, a little disconcerting. He is familiar with Smith's offense, having played it in Atlanta in the first 12 games of the season last year, even if the role was minor. I really like Roman Wilson. You guys heard me talk about this, on draft night. I think once he gets up to speed, refines his route running, could be a difference maker in the middle of the field out of the slot, like he was at Michigan. Had a little bit of a minor leg injury, which might set him back a little bit. I think the skills he showed in Ann Arbor are going to translate. May not win the wide receiver 2 spot outright. I think he'll get wide receiver 3. 4.39 speed, ability to turn short gains into explosive plays. 37.5% of his catches last year went for 20. How that's going to translate in Smith's scheme, tough to call. Pat Freiermuth has developed some serious chemistry with Wilson in the offseason. Could become a focal point. Smith's offense is generally considered tight end friendly. So, maybe he becomes the de facto number 2, so you don't have to worry about which one of these, guys is going to, separate themselves. And I got to tell you, we all know that the Steelers' the biggest Achilles heel the last couple of years wasn't mediocre play, quarterback player struggles in the running game. We bashed him often enough on the show. The scheme and play calling of former offensive coordinator Matt Canada, who was fired after week 11. Proof being that Pickett had the best game of his career the following week with, Mike Sullivan calling the play using the same playbook. Arthur Smith getting fired as head coach in Atlanta gave Tomlin, who said in his end of season press conference he wanted an experienced play caller, gets to bring in the former Tennessee OC in his, RPO and play action heavy scheme. Think about what that scheme produced in Tennessee. Derrick Henry, 2,000-yard runner. Ryan Tannehill actually became a legitimate quarterback 1. And Smith and Tomlin share a similar belief in old school football, specifically the benefit of the run game. And Smith won't have a singular running back like Henry, but I think the Steelers' two-headed monster of Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren will work just fine. As far as Wilson and his fit, he's been around long enough and he's smart enough to learn a new offense on the fly. Tomlin wants the Steelers to be a downhill running team that heavily uses play action to pick up chunk plays downfield. Wilson had a 112.5 passer rating on attempts of 20-plus yards last year. His numbers went against play action, 117.2 passer rating, 67.6 completion percentage, 7.5 yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns. Offensive players so far are loving this offense. Granted, it's a low bar in the post-Canada era, but the way Smith's offense creates favorable matchups, with formations and personal groupings in the scheme, has the unit excited in a way they never were under Canada. Is it going to result in the Steelers, morphing into the 2020 Titans? That offense was number 2 in the league in rushing at 168 yards per game. And their offense was number 4 at almost 31 points per game behind, Tannehill, 33 TDs and 106 passer rating. Who was that guy? The Titans offense in that stretch was number 4 in the NFL in EPA per play with Tannehill under center. The 3 teams that they trailed that year, Chiefs, Ravens, and Packers. Who were those guys quarterbacks that year? Mahomes, Jackson, and a better previous version of Aaron Rodgers. The biggest question is can Smith and Wilson adapt to each other? Wilson likes to throw outside the numbers, not so much down the middle. He struggled with that. Smith actually prefers to throw a little bit over the middle, but Wilson is familiar with an offensive scheme predicated on a heavy run game that doesn't ask too much of a quarterback. He did that for a decade in Seattle. Didn't use the tight end too much other than when Jimmy Graham was there for 3 years. But he's seemingly gotten comfortable throwing to Freiermuth, who excels on, going over the middle. So, we'll see. A little more, you're going to see a lot more 12 and 13 personnel groupings. The Steelers have a really deep tight end room with Connor Haywood and Darnell Washington. And Smith is prone to using his tight ends to attack downfield. Last year, the Falcons, as anemic as they were, led the NFL in receiving yards from the tight end slot, almost 1,400. They were 5th in receptions, 114. It'll be interesting to see, if all of this can combine to teach Wilson, new 36-year-old dog, some new tricks, give the Steelers passing game a dimension it never had under Canada. Look, plenty of reason for optimism on this side of the ball. Steeler Nation hasn't been able to say that since number 7 retired. So it's going to be very interesting training camp and preseason for the black and gold to see how this thing, plays itself out.
But very important. What were the 7-on-7 stats, Jay? Because I need to know the 7-on-7 stats.
I have to go back and check, but I believe
I need my fantasy football 7-on-7 stats immediately. I must have missed the beginning.
I believe in both of Fields' portions of those 7-on-7 drills, the defense won both times.
All right, Anthony, you do not have to give a 7-on-7 stat, but you also have another choice from the
I'm impressed that you have any familiarity at all with the Steelers 7-on-7.
I just wanted to know.
7
Well,
shots, actually.
Well, I'm going to take a trip to the AFC West and look at the Denver Broncos. And you think about going into this year, they have quarterback issues of their own as far as competition going on. You have Jarrett Stidham, who was a holdover from last year. Remember, started the last 2 games of the season after Russell Wilson was benched, and he only comes into the season with 4 starts to his career. Then you have Zach Wilson, who we've mentioned a couple of times on the show already, the former Jet who started 33 games and is looking to revive his career. Then you have the number 12 overall pick and Bo Nix from Oregon, who has gotten some good reviews in training camp. But of course, we know on this show, if you're a rookie, we're not going to push you in Canton, Ohio, based on 7-on-7, 11-on-11. So we'll just put that to the side. But this team also has question marks along the roster. Jerry Jeudy is no longer there. We know about his beef with Steve Smith Sr. and among other things, as well as inconsistent play. He is now a Cleveland Brown. Cortland Sutherland, who just got a new contract a few days ago, is now slotted as the number 1 receiver. Behind him is a lot of young, unproven talent that's going to be thrown to the threshold, thrown to the crossfire right away. And also on top of that, there was no change as far as the tight ends on this depth chart, which is not good when you consider the Broncos tight ends total 39 catches for 362 yards total last year. That is fewer than 28 individual tight end stats. And when you look at the entirety of the National Football League last season, year 2 under Vance Joseph, as far as the defense, is hoping to be a lot better than year 1. Remember, this is a team that got lit up for 70 points in week 3 against Miami, and finished the season 27 near the bottom of the league, defensively in scoring, and a secondary that lost 3 defensive starters, including Justin Simmons, who was a cap casualty and a Pro Bowl starter for the Broncos. But but a lot of the attention and the guy that's on the hot seat is definitely Sean Payton. If you think about what happened last year, how he handled the Russell Wilson situation, and now you have the Broncos basically paying Wilson's salary for the next 2 seasons. Jay, obviously, I texted you about this earlier, joking around. $53 million for this season, and Rabbi, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. $53 million for this season, and over 35 for next year. It's basically
the con artist strikes again.
Yeah, it's basically what the Broncos is on the hook for Wilson playing for someone else. Am I correct? Because I know in my right mind, I don't care how much I don't want you on my team. I'm not paying you that much to play against me under any circumstances. But Sean Payton, you think about this. Sean Payton's reputation precedes him from the New Orleans Saints. And when he took over that team, he had a veteran quarterback in Drew Brees, and kind of the perfect work relationship and system that just kind of gelled until the Saints took a 10-10. We don't know if he's even the right guy for a rebuilding different Broncos team that clearly is not going to be competing for any superiority in the AFC West division that clearly has the Kansas City Chiefs at the top and pretty much everyone else. When you think about the Raiders and the Chargers with their question marks, but also it's going to be how this season progresses, and with a young team, and a front office that just had not been able to get it right at the quarterback position since since John Elway retired. Yes, they had Peyton Manning for a few seasons. They even won a Super Bowl with him. But outside of that, they're pushing the Cleveland Browns as far as the list of quarterback starters they've had in the last 2 decades. This is it's an interesting make or break training camp for Sean Payton, just as far as where this team is headed, and is he the guy that can lead this team to at least to some kind of respectability? Remember, they finished 8-9 last year after a disastrous 5-12 season 2022, but they only won 2 of the final 6 games, and missed the play, and ultimately missed the playoffs, and that was after everything that happened with the benching and Wilson and the defense playing a little better. So that's I'm definitely going to keep an eye on how the Broncos perform, how Sean Payton handles being on a hot seat, because he pretty much is, throughout the whole season, because I can really see Sean Payton not being brought back. This thing turns on Titanic by week 10.
2 addendums to that, by the way. Number one, thank God you didn't mention the third quarterback that's in the room, Zach Wilson, who is currently out of favor right now in the starting quarterback battle. He was a legitimate candidate just because of the fact that they don't really have too much in there. But Sean Payton, not a patient man, by the way. And last time I checked. And also, one thing that's interesting, John Elway just recently said in an interview, and he needs to take a ton of the blame for this, almost all of the blame for his bad quarterback drafting. He regrets not drafting Josh Allen in 2018 when he had the opportunity, and that probably could have changed this franchise post Peyton Manning, but it didn't. Now the Broncos have, I think, the second longest playoff drought right now in the NFL, next to the New York Jets. So yeah, that's not a good thing. Joe, let's go to the NFC, and no matter what the situation, no matter what the year, the Cowboys will always get just a little too much shine during training camp. This year is no different.
Yeah, and again, I think this is the one this is like snake oil Jerry Jones salesman, where he's trying to get it both ways. I think he actually believes he's in a building year. I think he's trying to figure out how to pay some guys and how to let some other guys go, but he has to keep that America's team baloney alive and has to tell everybody he's going for it. And you go back out and sign Ezekiel Elliott as your running back, who you let walk away a couple of years ago, who's done, who we've seen him. Yeah, he can play a few downs here and there, but he's never been a 3-down back. So to bring him back doesn't make any sense at all. And you let Tony Pollard walk away, and then you let your left tackle leave, and then you let your right guard leave, and then you try to pay all this. They have no wide receivers except for CeeDee Lamb, and we all know how well Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb get along when it counts. Not very well at all. You saw their horrific playoff experience last year. And again, he won't sign Dak Prescott, even though he says he loves him like a son. And again, I wouldn't want to be Jerry Jones's kid if this is how he loves his son. So I'm not sure where they're going with all this stuff. I think Mr. 12 interceptions, which by the way is more than 10, right, Rabbi? 12 is
yes, he got up to it towards the end of the year. We thought he would be under it, but the Dak Prescott interception watch is something that me and Joe have had a lot of fun with over the last few years. It's almost like a fall tradition.
It is. So again, we all have seen it happen with them for now many, many years. Is they play good during the season. They have all these superstars that they kind of make out to be, and of course they get blown more out of proportion than they actually are. But when they get to the playoffs, they just fail, and it's ugly. I mean, the playoff game last year was embarrassingly bad between those two guys yelling at each other on the sideline, and Dak Prescott missing them by 5 yards here and there, and people dropping balls. And I mean, Brandon Cooks is the only guy on that whole team who can catch a pass, and the tight end's not terrible. But, Brandon Cooks is 32 now or whatever he is. So, you're getting to that point where, again, you got one really good defensive back. You lost your safeties. You have one really good linebacker who is not as great as they make him out to be. He's fantastic, but he's not Lawrence Taylor. And unfortunately, again, you have like one really standout guy at each spot and at each level, and it just doesn't work. And again, you can beat up on some bad teams, and Dak Prescott can have some good games when he runs the ball, when he does different things, again, takes it, but they all try to take it all on their own shoulders, this team. And I just don't think that works very well. And
I
again,
think
until they can figure out something in the playoffs, I mean, as bad as they played last year, as bad as the Eagles played at the end of the year, and as bad as the Cowboys looked at the end of the year, there's obviously a miss there somewhere that it's not about, you know, we all like to see those 18 games mean something. Those 18 weeks mean something in the thing, but now that it's 18 and there's 17 games and it's going to go to in 18 weeks, and now sooner or later it's going to go to 18 games. The records don't mean as much anymore, right, Jay? I mean, if you're 9-9 next year, when they go to 18 games, you're going to get in the playoffs. So,
Hey, I mean, Joe, how often, and when it was just 16 games, did we see a 7-9 team win a division and
Right.
limp into the playoffs?
right. So, it's only going to get worse, and it's going to get easier and easier to make it to the playoffs and to beat up on some bad teams and to put up some good scores and to win your division. But you got to play the whole season, and you got to keep guys healthy, and you have to have some kind of chemistry at the end of the year. And
Yep.
I don't think, again, bringing back Ezekiel Elliott at 40 years old makes any sense, and letting Tony Pollard go. Use some of the money that you used to take some of these backup wide receivers. You could have put all that together and kept one of your running backs to give Dak Prescott some help. He's got nothing at this point. And it's almost like he's setting him up to fail so he doesn't have to pay him $80 million, because that's what quarterback's going to be making next year. And he traded for Trey Lance last year, right? Trey Lance can keep him for $4 million next year. He doesn't have to pay him 60 or whatever it is, because with the new contract that Burrow just got, right, what are quarterbacks going to be making next year?
which
I
we'll
mean,
talk
it's
about.
nuts.
We're going to talk
We'll
about
talk
that.
about in just a second, but the three things I want to actually kind of mention on it. I think Dallas has to go for it just because of the fact that the NFC is meh,
Yeah.
to say the least. Once you get past the 49ers and the Lions, I think you have a lot of questions pretty much everywhere. And we saw a lot of the Philly problems last year, i.e. Jalen Hurts kind of like losing his wings and stopping really to fly. Number two, and we didn't even mention Mike McCarthy, who has probably the shortest seat of any coach right now in the NFL. If you're going to look at somebody who can't get to a 2-5 start and can continue on as the coach, it's him. And number three, did you say Ezekiel Elliott was 40 years old? He came out of the 2015 draft class.
He runs
Come
like a
on.
40. No, I said he
He
runs
does
like
run like a 40-year-old. Absolutely. That's he's like Derrick Henry on like 1/3 play on your Apple podcast. But Zeke can still semi go. I think, and I think you even said it last year. Pollard was just really dependent on way too much and highly overrated. And I think that's a very good situation in terms of, and we'll see it also in New York this year with Barkley not being there anymore. We're going to see a lot more. I think we talked about it last year when running backs weren't paid. We're going to see what that position really means in the near future.
Yep.
All right. I am going to talk. I actually have points. I get to do them on this show from time to time. And my talk is going to be about the Vikings. Yeah, they couldn't get the re-sign Kirk Cousins in the offseason. He got overpaid by Atlanta, to say the least. They wanted a stable quarterback, and then they picked up a rookie quarterback. But that's not the team we're talking about here. We're talking about Minnesota. So they had to go out and get a couple of different options. Option number one, door number one, is Sam Darnold. Yeah, he is not great in terms of record. It's 13-30, but he has started a ton of games in his career and hasn't really played in good offenses. And the Kevin O'Connell-led team with their offense could be the solution for him. I know that sounds crazy, and you can just call me crazy under your breath. I don't care. I think this is thank you. But I do think when you have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison to throw to, who are deep threats on the field, you're going to make throws that you can have maybe like a little bit off that they can catch. I mean, for God's sakes, Addison literally took a ball last year against San Francisco from a player's hands and then just went in for a touchdown. I know Addison has had a couple of issues also with the law that need to be looked at, but we'll kind of get into that later. This is all about the quarterback position right now. Darnold can succeed in this offense. I truly believe it. And I think, again, we talked about it just before. 8-9 could make you a playoff team. 9-8 could make you a playoff team. And considering Minnesota plays in the NFC North, Darnold might be the answer. Darnold better watch his back, though. I know JJ McCarthy is not your typical starter in year one. I don't think he should play, but we have to look at where we are now in this world and see. Sam Darnold throws 3 or 4 interceptions in one game. People are going to be calling for JJ McCarthy. His progress in camp has been good. He has been mentioned by a lot of people as somebody who has done a good job, learned quickly with the system. I mean, again, he was 27-1 in Michigan, so it's not like the guy does not know how to win. And I think some of the best quarterbacks we've seen are people who did know to win know how to win in college. The problem with McCarthy, and you can assess him however you want, and he has been given, again, all of this praise, is the fact that this is not a guy who is ever known to throw the long ball. He is a guy who works in a run-first offense for a team that doesn't necessarily have a really good option at running back one right now. They did pick up Aaron Jones from Green Bay, but again, he runs probably like, I would say, a 34, 35-year-old, not necessarily a 40-year-old. He runs better in the playoffs, so he is getting up there and is also a guy who does get injured a lot. So Minnesota, and by the way, someone like McCarthy, I don't think he's going to start week one. I think Sam Darnold is probably going to get the position, but in a week one scenario, if you need to go to McCarthy due to injury or again, due to pressure, and I think this is not a rebuilding year for Minnesota, but this is one of those you can go either way years. And if you can use Hawkinson a lot more in the offense, if you want to make it more of a dink and dunk type offense, you might need new wide receivers, and Justin Jefferson might be asking for a trade sooner than later, although he did get paid this offseason. You might have McCarthy as your option. I think this is not a good problem to have because both of these are not proven winners in the NFL. Again, McCarthy obviously a proven winner in college, but it's not a bad problem to have. It's probably a better quarterback room than I expected going into training camp, and I think this team has a possibility to at least compete for a wild card. They just have to choose who they want to start in the beginning of the season. I think McCarthy will probably start the season, and I think they're going to hold off Darnold as much as possible because that's going to probably be your week one starter. All right. Let's move on to quarterbacks who are paid a lot more than Sam Darnold's 1 year, $10 million deal. Anyway, so we know the quarterback is the most important position. That's what a little bird told me. And then that little bird opened up his or her pockets. It could be a woman. Don't know what the sex of the bird was. And a ton of money came out for 4 quarterbacks too. And this might give away our segment. Combined for 6 playoff wins and not even a conference championship. Not a conference championship, but only one of these 4 players have been to a conference championship. And that's where we're going to start, Joe. Jared Goff got paid this offseason. He's helped lead Detroit to good things, but is he worth the new mega contract that he got?
Yeah, and I think that when I finally actually read the question that we were going to talk about was, who is a little bit, less of it, who made sense to get this quarterback, to get this contract. And I think Goff makes sense for Detroit because it makes sense for Detroit. I think, they brought him in there. He said the change of scenery was fantastic for him. We know he was forced into a position in LA because they were opening a new stadium and they wanted to win right away. And they had to pick a quarterback number 1. And he probably wasn't the first pick in the draft. That he probably didn't deserve it at that point. But we all know what the draft's turned into is quarterbacks first, and whoever ESPN picks, that's who you have to go pick. But I think that Goff making the change, putting him behind a really, really good offensive line, giving him a fantastic running game. They re-signed 2 of his wide receivers. They re-signed St. Brown and the other guys. So they went out there and built the team around those guys. And I don't think you had a choice but to pay him because of what he did for you last year and the fact that they still think there's an upside there. And you couldn't have taken that team that went that far. And if it wasn't for probably a very poor decision twice by the head coach on those 4th down calls in that playoff game. They could have even gone further and played in the Super Bowl. I don't think you could pull him out of there at that point and go with somebody new or try to find a free agent. It wouldn't have made any sense. So to pay him for an upside, to keep him in Detroit, to say he's a Detroit guy, this is our guy, give him all the confidence and build around him made a ton of sense. I don't think you really had a choice but to do that. And so I thought that contract was worth doing, because here's a young team that still has some younger players that they didn't have to pay crazy money to yet. You still have this window now of 3-4 years. You have a really good coaching staff. You have a young coaching staff. You have some really popular guys there, and they continue to bring in good defensive players. I think that team's just starting to gel together. We all know how dangerous the team that lost in that championship game is the next year. And I think that's the position they're in. And for the fact for you to say, with past the Niners in Detroit, the NFC is very weak, you had to keep that consistency there. And I think that was a really good sign.
All right, Anthony, why'd I let you take this one? And did Trevor Lawrence prove to the Cons that he was all elite with his new contract?
Yeah. Well, anyway, Trevor Lawrence gets the 5-year, $275 million extension in the offseason. But you got to look at his 3 seasons as a starter. It's been very up and down, to say the least. Nightmare rookie season. I think he got to the point where we didn't know if he would even survive his rookie season because he was getting hit so many times. Year 2, so much better. It was so much better. Pro Bowler, led the Jaguars to the playoffs. 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Won a playoff game, even though you can make the argument that playoff win had a lot more to do with what the Chargers didn't do than anything that the Jaguars did in that Saturday night playoff game. But he's coming off a year 3 where the Jaguars lost 5 of their last 6 games, lost the division to the Houston Texans, and missed the playoffs altogether. Where he had 21 touchdowns, his interceptions was up to 14. His touchdown was down as well. Now, when you look at the Jaguars, I mean, this is kind of a no-brainer in the fact that you couldn't risk going into next season, and the idea of him maybe hitting the free agent market and getting an even bigger deal. But at the same time, it's still kind of I would say maybe an incomplete if you want to grade this contract extension, because it's almost like you got the contract based on what he did 2 seasons ago, not has the whole body of work, to say the least. And this is going to be a critical year. I mean, because he is going to be the guy. The Cons is giving him the money. He is the franchise guy. He's been a leader in the locker room, and he obviously gifted quarterback, gifted athlete. But now you're gonna have to get that kind of money. You want to start seeing results. And for Jacksonville, I don't think another 98 season is going to help matters. They want to see Trevor Lawrence take his game to the next level, and they're giving him the money to do that. Now the question is going to be if it's going to be able to do it and live up to that contract this season and beyond.
And you're going to have you have a division now that has CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson, who have shown a ton of promise, and that could be trouble going forward. I would also mention Will Levis in Tennessee, but why would I mention Will Levis in Tennessee? He is by far a step below all of those people. By the way, before we get to you, Jay, Joe, let's have a moment of silence for us not being able to make fun of Brandon Staley this year, since you did mention that one coach that blew that lead against the Jaguars.
I know.
I wasn't going to say it, but it was there. Anthony, I know you were about to say something. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I was going to say that the AFC South, I mean, it's going to be fun to watch because you have these young quarterbacks that showed a lot of promise. Obviously, Stroud coming off a playoff win, division title. Obviously, Levis has shown some promise. Richardson was playing well until he got hurt last year as well. So, and Trevor Lawrence now becomes the elder statesman in that division because he's been the starter the longest, believe it or not.
How weird is that?
It's kind of odd, but yeah, the division when you look at Jacksonville, Like I said, it's not a wide open division, but it's a anyone's ball game division. When you think about when you think about, I mean, Jacksonville losing kind of opened the door for the Colts and the Texans to play for the division title that final week of the season. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. But yeah, Trevor Lawrence at this point, he needs to step it up to being a Pro Bowl level quarterback if you want to justify getting this big contract. And you can't have 14 interceptions, get sacked 35 times, and thrown into double, sometimes triple coverage like he was doing at times last season.
Oh, interception-prone quarterbacks are definitely the part of this segment, by the way. By the way, just a point of order. I believe Indianapolis and Houston played for a playoff spot. Jacksonville choked on the final day, and that playoff spot ended up becoming a division.
Yes, they lost to the Texans. They lost
yes.
not the Texans, the Titans on the road. They lost that last week.
Speaking of choking, Joe, with apologies to our friend Nisa, Tua Tagovailoa's end of seasons have not been the best. And he did get the bag this offseason from Miami.
Yeah. Every team in the NFL knows that, success starts with having a franchise quarterback. And once you feel you have one, you do what you have to in order to lock them up for an extended period of time. Sometimes these contracts seem like an egregious overpay. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Cleveland, and the money you threw at Deshaun Watson. And sometimes the juice is worth the squeeze. The Dolphins apparently feel it is, as they wound up paying their number one quarterback the largest extension in NFL history, 4 years, $212 million. It's an annual average value of $53.1 million, which is the fourth highest among all quarterbacks, with $167 million guaranteed, and it'll keep the number 5 overall pick of the 2020 NFL draft in South Beach through the 2028 season. Now, the Dolphins clearly believe in Tua Tagovailoa's ability to get them back to the playoffs for the first time since 2001. And word out of Miami Gardens is that head coach Mike McDaniel went to bat for his quarterback with GM Chris Greer in ownership to get the deal over the finish line. McDaniel has long said he stays out of contract negotiations as it makes it easier for Greer to do his job. But in this instance, McDaniel felt the need to get involved. He hasn't commented on what he did to help get the deal done. And Tua said he found out about McDaniel's involvement from other folks in the facility. Look, Tua loves being in Florida. He loves McDaniel and the Dolphins offense. Who wouldn't, as throwing to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle resulted in a Pro Bowl season for Tua with an NFL leading 4,624 yards passing, career highs in completion percentage, 69.3 in touchdowns, 29 in passer rating at 101.1. But now that the deal is done, Tua will be under even more pressure and scrutiny than before. We all know how the media feed the narrative and how the fans buy into it, that a player who gets paid is expected to take his game to the next level and take the team to new heights. Tua recognizes this, saying, quote, heavy is the crown. We haven't won the games that we wanted to win, deep into the playoffs, getting deep into the playoffs, win the games that matter. Here's the Dolphins' records in the games that matter since Tua has been QB1. 1-6 against teams that made the playoffs last season. 10-1 against teams that didn't. 24-9 in Tua starts in September, October, and November. 10-11 in Tua starts in December and January. Tua is also 0-7 in starts where the temperature is below 40 degrees. Think KC and Buffalo in December and January. You brought up Nisa's name, and I asked her, being our former host and resident Dolphins expert, on whether or not she felt Tua was worth the contract Miami gave him, and here's her take. I'm skeptical about the Tua deal. Personally, would have preferred they waited another year to see how he does this season. He gets in his own head a lot and hasn't yet proved he can win in playoff conditions under pressure. I like the guy, and I'm hopeful he'll live up to this deal, but not totally sold on him as an elite NFL quarterback. That being said, I understand why the Dolphins wanted to get the deal done now to have the salary cap flexibility going forward. Plus, Tua gets a lot of bonus incentives for playoff wins and staying healthy, so that is good. I can understand why she's not totally sold on Tua as an elite quarterback. These advanced stats pretty much make her case. Expected points added, EPA, per dropback. In 2022, 0.18, number 5. Last year, 0.15, number 8. Passer rating, 2022, 105.5, number 4. Last year, 101.1, number 10. Total quarterback EPA, 2022, 69.4, number 9. Last year, 60.7, number 12. Tua's numbers have gotten worse in every one of those categories over the last 2 years. Granted, he stayed in somewhat the same percentile neighborhood, but in order for the Dolphins to become a true Super Bowl contender, Tua needs to get back to being a top 5, top 10 quarterback in those 3 stats. And if he can do that, and he can get the team over its inability to win those games that matter, regardless of location or temperature, then and only then will he be worth the contract he's been given.
Bill Parcells used to say, how could I be the chef if I don't have the groceries? When you have Raheem Mostert, Devin Achane, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle, you have the groceries, you have the express aisle, and you're ready to go. So I don't think there's any excuses for Tua going forward. I think considering what Buffalo doesn't have this season, this is Miami's division to lose. So Jordan Love, people must hate Green Bay because they literally go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. Good Aaron Rodgers would be one of we want to specify that apparently on this show.
You don't seem to like them much.
Jordan Love. And Jordan Love, who I remember from the season when he was a sophomore, who basically got thrown into a game versus the Kansas City Chiefs because Aaron Rodgers essentially lied about COVID.
Surprise.
And he was terrible. He was terrible, didn't look anything like an NFL quarterback, and I'm sure all the help that he got from Aaron Rodgers really helped him set himself along. Yeah, exactly. But instead, Jordan Love did get the vote of confidence last season to have his chance with the Packers as starting quarterback from day one. And even though the beginning of the season was rough, post-Thanksgiving, after he beat the Lions on the road, he turned it on. 41 touchdowns last season. 4,100 yards last season, 32 touchdowns in 17 starts. And this is why he got a 4-year, $220 million contract extension, tying him with the highest average salary ever for a player in NFL history. This stat's going to change from year in and year out. Jordan Love also played his best at the end of the year, winning games when he needed the most, winning a must-win game against a division rival at Lambeau Field against the Bears. Aaron Rodgers didn't do that the season before against Detroit. And we really we talked about Jordan Love last year and asked, is he the answer? And he did become the answer because he played exceptional in the playoff game against Dallas, winning and just dominating that whole entire game. The San Francisco game, he played very well for 2-3 quarters, and we mentioned it before, threw some terrible passes in the fourth quarter, whether that was LaFleur just not calling the right game in the fourth quarter, or it was just an inexperienced quarterback who couldn't find his wide receivers. We don't know, but it is a good lesson for Jordan Love going forward. Green Bay would have probably, I feel like, been in the Super Bowl if they did win that game. But overall, I'm looking at who the hell he's going to throw the ball to. There is no Devontae Adams in there right now. Obviously, he's been with the Raiders for many and many years. And the other options are fine. Romeo Doubs was the guy who really, really stepped up last season, especially towards the end of the year. But in two seasons, he has 101 catches for 1,099 yards and 11 touchdowns. Again, that's 2 seasons, not 1. Overall, then you also have Christian Watson, who was kind of hurt, banged up in his second season. It seemed like he worked better as the number 1 for Aaron Rodgers more than he worked as the number 1 for Jordan Love. And he has a Jordy Nelson type feel to him, except he's small. But that's another story for another time. So, and you have Dontavian Wicks. And if you don't know who Dontavian Wicks, perfectly fine. A lot of people also don't know who Dontavian Wicks was. Even the Packers don't, because he only ran a route of 44.1% of the team's dropback last year and had a target share of the regular season and playoffs of 10.7. Not great. So overall, and again, the biggest name on that board is going to be Jaden Reed. Never exceeded an 80% snap share, but 793 yards, 64 receptions on 94 targets, and 8 touchdowns. Designated target rate of 21.7%. A success rate that was pretty much 75% average when no matter what the coverage was. 72 against man, 81.7 success rate versus zone coverage. That's exactly the guy who, by the way, the top designated target rate people last year on the list, top 5, all rookies. That's why people are getting wide receivers now. And if Jordan Love can find the confidence and can really stick with a wide receiver going forward, I think Jordan Love will definitely be worth the 4-year, $220 million that he got in the offseason. And we're going to hate Green Bay forever and ever. Amen. All right, Joe, very nice to talk to you. Thank God you have the rest of your night left. We love Pacific Coast time, and I'm sure you love
It was a pleasure, my friend.
I'm sure you love waking up early in the morning for games,
Yes.
and I now regret ever joking about people waking up at 10 o'clock for NFL football. So, Joe, nice to talk to you. We'll see you in a few weeks when we do our kickoff stuff.
Pleasure, guys. Talk to you soon.
Have a good night, my friend.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Have a good night, Joe. As we wait for the disconnection, here we go. Our last segment of the night at 11:47 of the evening. The closer of our show is the Olympics. And how easy is it to write this open? I had a few minutes and I just did it. We talked about the preview last week as we were a few days out. And now let's talk about what we've seen this week as we're a few days in. Jay, go first.
My favorite week one moment came what seemed like pretty much right after the opening ceremonies. American Tori Husk winning the gold in the 100-meter fly and her teammate Gretchen Walsh taking the silver. Husk winning the 100-meter fly gold in Paris comes on after she missed the podium by 1/100th of a second in Tokyo. I mean, this is a great story. It was her first ever Olympic medal, and she did it against a stacked pool of competitors, including her teammate, Gretchen Walsh. A day earlier, during Saturday night semifinals, Walsh set a new Olympic record in the 100 fly with a time of 55.38 seconds. She'd owned the world record in the event since the U.S. Olympic trials back in June, where she posted a blistering 55.18. Walsh had the lead after the first 50 meters, but Husk ran her teammate. They were practically even with 10 meters left, and everyone else down in the final 50, which was the part of her race game that she spent most of the last 4 years working to improve to post a winning time of 55.59 seconds, beating her teammate to the wall by 0.04 seconds in one of the most exciting finishes of the Paris Games to that point. Walsh finished in 55.63, taking home the silver. China's Zhang Yufei claimed the bronze. The silver was Walsh's first Olympic medal in her first Olympic Games, and she said it was quite an honor. Quote, "There was a lot of pressure on me just having done the Olympic record. I just wanted to execute the race as best I could. It was definitely a fight to the finish, and seeing the 1-2 up there was amazing. It might not have been the time I was necessarily looking for, but to even medal at my first Olympics is something that I don't think many people get to say. I'm honored, truly, and I'm so proud of Tori. She has worked so hard for this. I'm proud of myself. This was what America needed and won. It was a really special moment we shared up there on the podium." Husk was understandably emotional after the race, saying, quote, "I feel like I'm in shock right now, like I don't even know how to process it. Like I feel like I'm going to cry, but I'm also smiling. And considering what happened in Tokyo, shock is an appropriate feeling to beating the world record holder in the event, who happens to be your teammate, to win your first ever Olympic medal." And in a very classy move, Husky had Walsh join her on the gold medal level of the podium for the playing of the national anthem. Very few sporting events give us stories like this. And I'm going to channel my inner, Brad Pitt, Billy Bean right here. How can you not be a little romantic about the Olympics?
Original. Anthony, go ahead.
For me, it's going to be the star power, and not just what we've seen as far as the athletes, but all the celebrity star power we've seen at the Olympic Games. Whether it's Flavor Flav, not just being a fan of the women's polo team. He's
Yes.
Women's polo. He's actually sponsoring
The women's
the
water polo team. Yeah.
Polo team. The greatest hype man of all time. Shout out to my fellow Public Enemy fans. But also you see Spike, like the likes of Spike Lee and Chrissy Teigen, John Legend, and Peyton Manning, and obviously being a part of NBC's Olympic coverage. And also, I think we all are having fun living vicariously through Snoop Dogg this week, because
Is anybody having more fun at the Olympics than that guy, Anthony?
I think he's the unofficial spokesperson for the 2024 Olympic Games, because if it's not watching him swim with Michael Phelps or hang out with Team USA, the Team USA men's basketball team, or fencing, not looking good at doing it, but fencing nonetheless. Even being a torch carrier, it's been fun to watch.
Yeah.
And also, and obviously, I have to mention Celine Dion's performance and to cap off the open ceremony. Just unbelievable performance, and just great seeing her being able to perform live again after everything she's gone through. But I think back to last year, and the reason why I talked about celebrity and see this kind of like this unity and willing to root for Team USA. I just think back to last summer when the women's soccer team, when it lost, and it felt like we got to a point, and you spend a lot of time on social media. We live in a very polarized and political time in this country, and it felt like to me it felt like we're a country that openly root against our own athletes, and they're representing us, they're representing the country, and now a year to see everyone, so many people like Kevin Durant and LeBron and even athletes or there celebrities sitting in watching other athletes perform and root no more. It's a great sign to see that, yes, America can unite and can be one unit and root for each other and on a grander stage in front of the world. And it just, for me personally, it's a great thing to see, because we have a lot of politics in a way to kind of view the way we look at athletes a little skew it a little too long, and to kind of see these celebrities become fans again. Even Tom Cruise has showed up to the summer games.
Missed his daughter's high school graduation, though. Shame on you, Tom.
I don't want to get too much into that one, but yeah, to see celebrities become fans again, and to see athletes marvel at other athletes and what they can do, and the amazing feat. And by the way, how about the women's rugby team winning a medal for the first time? And then you see the rowing team winning gold. And
first time since 1960.
Yeah, and these amazing stories that we get to be part of, and it's just great to see social media and to see the reactions to these athletes and what they're able to do, and to say, yes, we're fans, but we're also Team USA. You see my shirt that I'm wearing, we're Team USA, and for a couple of years, it didn't feel that way. And whether it was the women's Olympic team, whether it was watching the athletes in 2021, now it just felt like a different story, a different feel to these games, and for me, it's a welcome sight, to go back to like, hey, we're the United States of America, we're USA. Win or lose, we appreciate these athletes spending 4 years of their lives working their tails off to compete on the highest level in their respective sports. And like I said, it's a great thing to see. And I know for me, I'll be able. I'm looking forward to having some time off and being able to watch the events more live instead of having to watch them on tape delay. But yeah, it's just great for me as a fan to be able to see myself at the same level as some of these celebrities, and saying, hey, yeah, these athletes are amazing, and it's just great to watch.
Before I go, Tom Cruise did not miss Surrey's graduation because of the Olympics. It was much worse. He missed it because of the Eras Tour. That is 100% true. So it's much worse than that. Okay. I'm going to list some of my favorite moments. I'm going to start on the U.S. side, and then I'm going to go to some weird ass moments that I've seen so far. You mentioned the U.S. women's soccer team. The difference between the U.S. women's soccer team and the World Cup last year and Emma Hayes led soccer team this year is night and day. Trinity Rodman, Sophia Smith, and Mallory Swanson are basically playing a 3-woman version of NBA Jam right now out there on the soccer field. And to see how they've been dominating so far is insane. The men's soccer team making again, 8 teams do make it to the quarterfinals, but they actually played France really well for 65 minutes, and they'll play Morocco tomorrow, Friday, if you don't watch it on this taping. Got to mention gymnastics. I'll start with the men first, because them getting their first gold in their first bronze in over since 2008 is insane, just because they were terrible in their qualifying. What's even more shocking is the fact that even though Fred Richard goes through all of these events, Brody Malone goes through all of these events and knocks it out of the park, the biggest memed moment is Steven Nedorozic, who is a specialist on pommel horse, having to wait until the very last moment of the very last rotation, and there are 6 rotations, enough that NBC had to put a countdown clock right on the side, basically saying when he's going to go. And watching that happen is very, very interesting going
But
forward.
hey, Rabbi, at the end, Clark Kent became Superman.
Clark Kent did become Superman, to be fair. All they needed was a 12-7 at that point. But I digress. It was all about the glasses. Watching, obviously, the U.S. women do extraordinary things out there, winning the gold pretty much, honestly, without breaking a sweat. Watching Italy be second and breaking they hadn't won any medals at that event as a team since 1924. Brazil winning their first medal in bronze. And then watching today, seeing Simone Biles rightfully retake her crown at the top, performing some amazing routines out there, beating Rebecca Andrade, who I mentioned last show. Simone is the first ever woman to win 2 all-arounds, and Suni Lee finishing bronze after a rough start. The first gold medalist to podium at the subsequent next Olympics since some woman named Nadia Comaneci did it in 1976. So,
and Rabbi, did I see a stat that the U.S. women's gymnastics team has now won the last 6 consecutive all-around titles at the Olympics?
That is correct. They have won it since 2004. Now I want to talk about some of the people who are not from the U.S. really quickly to finish off this show. Summer McIntosh. We talked about her last week, and she just dominated in the 200 IM to win her first medal. Elaine Titmus winning that battle in the beginning of the Olympics, beating out Summer McIntosh and Katie Ledecky. Katie Ledecky, also, by the way, winning the 1500, and basically there was an all-22 look at the pool. No one was within miles of Katie Ledecky. It was just insane.
The opposite direction.
Leon Marchand is another big story out there.
You called that, Rabbi.
Yeah, winning 2 medals in literally 2 hours. And if you get a chance to look online and see Michael Phelps, who greatness recognizes greatness, they had Bob Bowman as their coach. Just seeing him react to the last 20 meters of the last lap of Marchand winning that second gold shows that he recognizes the underwater swimming of Marchand, which is just fucking insane. But I want to end on 2 notes, which is interesting. Number 1, the Canadian women's soccer team. I don't know how this came about, but the cheating that FIFA found out about, and apparently FIFA can dock them points in the Olympics. I didn't realize that. So they got docked 6 points.
Wow.
And then they won all 3 of their pool games. So they moved on. And they're going to be in the knockout rounds against Germany coming up on Saturday. And then they might face the U.S. in the semifinals. And it's been found out that the U.S. knew about some of this stuff, but they couldn't say it out loud because they had the bidding for the 2026 World Cup on the line, and they didn't want Canada to break off. By the way, their coach got suspended for a year, too, because of that. So they have something to play for. But I wanted to mention, I don't know, everyone has to have seen it. There is a Turkish Olympic shooter by the name of Yusuf Dekac. If you look at it online, I'm not going to show you the picture because we're running out of time. 51 years old. And while all of these shooters are wearing protective stuff, wearing vests, wearing everything, The man looks like he is wearing the same clothes he came out with, no goggles, straight up glasses, and basically looking like Dirty Harry, shooting everybody out, shooting everything out there. Insane stories for this Olympics. These first days have been amazing. There are some things I could also talk about too. The 3-on-3 teams are kind of struggling in the United States. A little sad to see the dominance of both the men's and women's basketball teams so far. The only story being who doesn't get any playing time game after game. Steve Kerr is like, why did I sign up for this when I get asked questions about Jason Tatum for 24 hours?
Rabbi.
He absolutely is. But I guess I will continue to mention this in the Olympics. It's in Paris. I don't care about how the opening ceremonies went. We're way past that. How could you not be romantic about the Olympics?
Energy's been fantastic.
All right. The energy is going to be less fantastic if we continue on here. It's time to end the show.
It is.
For Joe Tufaro, about time that the guests get the love first. Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait. I'm Steve Rabinowitz. Anthony's going to Vegas, so we'll be taking a small break before our next show. So we'll see you close to the end of this summer. YouTube.com/OnTheSportsLens on demand, Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLens live. And as I continue on my shooting of Are You Afraid of the Dark, Jay?
Our Twitter handle is at ONTH Sportslines, where you'll find a link to this show when the sun comes up. We also tend to post other interesting tidbits of related to the sports world we think are worth your time. We touched on this a little bit last week in our Olympic preview about what former NBA player Luol Deng has done with the South Sudan men's basketball team, pretty much building it from the ground up and funding it out of his own pocket, giving his country a source of pride and inspiration. It is the type of story we tune into the Olympics for. I posted the link to a terrific piece by the Athletic's Marcus Thompson on Deng and what he's done with the South Sudan's men's basketball team, and it is very worth the read. So please go to our page and check it out.
Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the next week. So we'll talk to you closer to the end of December. Good night, everyone.
Night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.